Ever find yourself like really craving chocolate? You're picturing that melt in your mouth's goodness.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's not quite as satisfying
Totally.
as you built it up to be. Well, my friend, you're face to face with your dopamine system. So today we're doing a deep dive into the world of dopamine and motivation with neuroscientist Andrew Huberman. And this is pulled from his interview on the Diary of a CEO podcast. So buckle up, folks. Get ready to unlock some serious productivity hacks.
I am ready.
All right.
So it's fascinating because we often hear dopamine called the pleasure chemical.
Right.
But Huberman, he kind of sets the record straight. It's not just about the pleasure itself, it's the anticipation. It's that drive towards wanting more that gets us hooked.
Like, I'm already more intrigued by the idea of this deep dive than actually doing it.
Exactly. And that's where it gets tricky because these dopamine peaks, well, they kind of set us up for some gnarly crashes. Yeah. Huberman paints this picture of a wave pool. You ride those high waves of motivation, but eventually you're left depleted in the trough.
So how do we avoid those dopamine dips? Especially after achieving a goal, it can feel like you just hit a wall.
Well, Huberman suggests a strategy called dopamine stacking.
Yeah.
So instead of aiming for one big reward, you kind of break your goals down into smaller milestones.
Okay.
And then celebrate each win.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so each mini celebration, it triggers a dopamine release, keeping you motivated and preventing a major crash.
So instead of aiming for, let's say, running a marathon, I celebrate completing each training run.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this applies to any goal, whether it's work, creative projects, even personal growth. By consistently rewarding yourself for progress, you create this positive feedback loop that keeps you moving forward.
Okay. This is really making me rethink my whole to-do list strategy. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I have to ask about Huberman's own journey. He didn't exactly have, like, an easy ride to becoming a neuroscience superstar.
No, not at all. His story is incredibly relatable, though, especially for anyone who's felt like maybe they didn't quite fit in. He was really open about his early struggles with depression and finding it hard to connect with others. But what's inspiring is how he channeled that energy, that intense focus into something positive.
He basically turned what some might consider a weakness into a superpower.
Totally.
Which I think really speaks to the power of neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Something Huberman is super passionate about.
Yeah.
He gives me hope that we can actually rewire our brains, like break free from those old patterns.
Absolutely. And neuroplasticity, it isn't just a buzzword.
Right.
It involves the actual growth of new neural connections and the strengthening of existing ones.
So you're essentially changing the physical structure of your brain.
Exactly.
Okay, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But how do we tap into that power? Is it just like positive thinking?
No, it's more about disrupting those automatic, negative thoughts and behaviors. Huberman has this cool technique. He says, write about being the opposite of your problem.
Okay.
So let's say you struggle with procrastination.
Yeah.
Instead of beating yourself up about it, sit down and write about, being this super productive, organized person.
Wait, so I'm like tricking my brain?
In a way, yes. By putting that opposite story into words, you're interrupting the old familiar narrative in your mind.
Okay.
You're creating a mental roadblock to those automatic behaviors.
That is so cool. I'm trying that tonight. So we talked about how dopamine can make us feel amazing, but also lead to those energy crashes.
Yeah.
How do we actually optimize this whole system for peak performance without burning out?
Well, Huberman's all about managing those energy transitions throughout the day. It's less about chasing constant highs and more about working with our natural rhythms. He's a big advocate for something called non-sleep deep rest.
Oh, yeah?
Or NSDR.
NSDR. I've heard about these guided meditations. It's crazy how such a short practice can be like hitting the reset button on your brain.
Totally.
And they're free online. Talk about accessible.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the simple stuff either.
Okay.
Huberman is a big believer in starting your day with 16 to 32 ounces of water.
Okay.
It kickstarts your system in a way that coffee just can't replicate.
And then there's sunlight. We've all heard it's good for us, but Huberman actually breaks down the science behind it. Just a few minutes outside, especially in the morning, boosts your cortisol, making you more alert and setting you up for better sleep later.
Yeah, and he's also big on finding your optimal exercise time.
Okay.
Morning workouts work wonders for some, while others do better with evening sessions. It's about listening to your body and figuring out what works best for you.
Okay, so we've got NSDR, hydration, sunlight, and exercise. What about food? Yeah. Does what we eat play a role in all of this?
Absolutely. Huberman's a big proponent of sticking to mostly unprocessed foods. It helps your brain make the connection between taste and true value, meaning you're less likely to crave those quick dopamine hits from junk food.
So I'm guessing that means cutting back on the sugar and processed snacks.
Exactly. And it's not about deprivation. It's about giving your brain a chance to appreciate the natural flavors and nutrients in real food.
That makes sense. So we've covered optimizing our individual dopamine systems.
Yeah.
But Huberman doesn't stop there. He actually brings in the importance of relationships and social connections for overall well-being.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how even those small, everyday interactions can play a huge role in regulating our dopamine levels. He gave this super practical tip: text a friend good morning every day.
I love that.
Yeah.
Such a simple act, but it can make a big difference in combating that sense of isolation that so many people feel.
Exactly. It's a little dopamine boost for both people involved, reminding them that they're connected and cared for. And Huberman walks the talk. He shared a really personal story about how just having friends present during a tough time made all the difference.
He got pretty emotional talking about it.
Yeah, he did.
Which was really powerful.
Yeah.
It reminded me that even incredibly successful people have messy lives and rely on their support systems.
It's a good reminder that we're all human, and connection is essential for our well-being.
All right. So we've tackled quite a bit already.
We have.
From dopamine peaks and crashes to neuroplasticity and the importance of social connection, it's clear this chemical plays a powerful role in shaping our experiences.
And we've only just begun to scratch the surface. There's so much more to uncover about how dopamine influences our motivation, habits, even our relationships. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the world of dopamine in part 2. Welcome back. Let's pick up where we left off with dopamine. It's not just about feeling good, it's about harnessing that drive to reach your goals. We've all heard dopamine is addictive, but Huberman explains how we can actually use that to our advantage.
So how do we use this knowledge to, say, finally tackle that project we've been putting off?
Well, Huberman emphasizes the importance of setting clear goals, but also breaking them down into smaller, more manageable steps. He's a big believer in the power of visualization, almost like creating a mental blueprint for success.
Like those athletes who visualize themselves winning before a competition.
Exactly. By vividly imagining those goals and those outcomes, you're kind of priming your brain for success. But here's where it gets interesting. Sharing your goals too widely can actually backfire.
Wait, really? I thought accountability was a good thing.
It can be, but that initial burst of positive feedback you get can actually decrease your motivation. Your brain gets a little dopamine hit just from talking about the goal, which reduces the urgency to actually do the work.
Oh, wow. I've totally been guilty of that. So what's the solution? Keep our dreams a secret?
Not necessarily. Huberman suggests finding a balance. Share your goals with a trusted few, who will offer genuine support and hold you accountable. But maybe hold back on broadcasting it to the world before you've made real progress.
Work in silence. Let success be your noise. I like it. Okay, we've covered a lot of positive stuff, but what about the darker side of dopamine? Addiction. How does this system get hijacked?
Yeah, that's a big one. Huberman dives deep into this, explaining how certain substances and even behaviors can create what he calls a dopamine loop. It's that cycle we talked about earlier, chasing the high, crashing hard, and needing more and more to feel okay.
He mentioned workaholism, stimulant use, even pornography addiction. Things that trigger those intense dopamine surges, but ultimately leave you depleted and trapped. I remember reading an article about how social media algorithms are designed to exploit this very system.
Absolutely. And what's crucial to understand is that it's not just about the substance or the behavior itself. It's about those neural pathways that get reinforced with each cycle. The more you travel down that road, the deeper that groove becomes.
So is there a way out? Can we actually rewire those addictive patterns?
Huberman is cautiously optimistic. He believes recovery is possible, but it requires a multi-pronged approach. Abstinence is often the first step, allowing the brain to kind of reset and those dopamine pathways to weaken.
He mentioned 30 to 60 days being crucial, but that sounds incredibly tough, especially for someone battling intense cravings.
It definitely is. And that's where therapy support groups and other interventions come in. Having a solid network to help you navigate those early stages and develop healthier coping mechanisms is essential.
Huberman also talked about finding alternative sources of dopamine, things that bring genuine fulfillment without those harmful crashes. We touched on healthy relationships, but he also mentioned pursuing meaningful goals. creative outlets, even spending time in nature.
Right. It's about retraining your brain to find pleasure and reward in activities that support your overall well-being. Speaking of well-being, let's talk about how dopamine influences our relationship with food.
Yes. Huberman was refreshingly open about his own struggles with food, especially his love for thin crust pizza. It's humanizing to hear someone so knowledgeable about the brain also admit to having their own vulnerabilities.
Totally. It reminds us that we're all susceptible to these dopamine-driven behaviors. It's not about willpower, it's about understanding the science and managing our relationship with this powerful chemical.
He shared some interesting insights into how our food choices impact our dopamine levels and even rewire our taste preferences.
Yeah.
Like cutting out processed foods for a few weeks can make those unhealthy options less appealing and increase your enjoyment of healthier foods.
It's like you're recalibrating your taste buds, teaching your brain to associate pleasure with foods that actually nourish your body. And it's fascinating how making one positive change can have this ripple effect on other areas of your life. Huberman shared that when he's in LA for work, he ends up eating mainly salads and lean protein, which improves his energy, his sleep, even his motivation to exercise.
Okay, so we've covered dopamine's role in motivation addiction and even our relationship with food. But I'm curious about its impact on our relationships with other people.
This is where things get really profound. Huberman emphasizes that healthy relationships aren't just good for our emotional health. They're crucial for regulating our dopamine system.
He talked about how social connection, even those small everyday interactions, provides a steady stream of dopamine, creating a sense of belonging and security. It's almost like we're wired for connection.
Exactly. And on the flip side, social isolation and loneliness lead to dopamine depletion, which contributes to feelings of sadness, anxiety, even depression. It's no wonder we crave those interactions. Remember his simple but powerful suggestion? Texting a friend good morning every day.
Yes, such a small act, but it can be a real game changer in terms of combating isolation and boosting our mood. It's like a little dopamine boost for both people.
And he wasn't just talking about romantic relationships. He emphasized friendships, family connections, even those chance interactions we have with people in our community. Think about it. Even saying hello to your barista or chatting with someone at the park can trigger those feel-good chemicals.
It's a good reminder that those face-to-face interactions are still incredibly valuable, even in our increasingly digital world. And it's not just about being present physically. It's about truly being present in those interactions, putting away our phones and listening to what the other person is saying.
It's about those moments of genuine connection where we feel seen, heard, and valued.
And that brings us to another fascinating concept Huberman explored, the Coolidge effect. Have you heard of this? It's the idea that novelty can boost dopamine and reignite passion in relationships.
Absolutely. It's based on the observation that both animals and humans experience this heightened desire and excitement when they're introduced to a new partner. But Huberman clarifies that it's not about seeking out multiple partners. It's about finding ways to bring novelty and excitement into existing relationships.
So it's not about cheating, but about keeping things fresh and exciting. It makes sense because routine can lead to boredom, which definitely dampens those dopamine sparks.
Exactly. He suggests couples experiment with new activities, explore new places together, or even shake up their usual date night routine.
It's like injecting a little surprise and spontaneity into the relationship. It's like remembering why you were attracted to each other in the first place.
And this concept of novelty isn't limited to romantic relationships. It can apply to friendships, family dynamics, even our work lives. Trying new things, stepping outside of our comfort zones, and exposing ourselves to new experiences. It can all trigger those dopamine surges and keep us feeling engaged and motivated.
It's about giving our brains a little jolt to remind us that there's still so much to discover and experience.
And it's a reminder that we don't have to settle for stagnation or boredom. There's always a way to reignite our passion, whether it's in our relationships, our work, or our own personal growth.
So we've explored dopamine's impact on motivation addiction, our relationship with food, and our relationships with others.
And we've barely scratched the surface. There's still so much we don't know about dopamine's complexity. But what's clear is that learning about this powerful chemical empowers us to make more conscious choices that support our well-being and lead to more fulfilling lives. Welcome back to our deep dive into dopamine. One thing that really struck me about Huberman was his willingness to be vulnerable. Yeah. Here's this brilliant neuroscientist openly sharing his struggles and the lessons he's learned. Right. He talked about experiencing loss heartbreak. Yeah. Even feeling like he was cursed at one point.
It definitely made him more relatable.
Yeah.
He wasn't just this expert giving us a lecture from on high.
Yeah.
He was someone who's been through it, made mistakes, and is still figuring things out.
Totally.
Just like the rest of us.
Exactly. And it reinforced his message about self-compassion. It's okay to not have all the answers, to stumble, to even fail sometimes.
Right.
What matters is that we keep learning, keep growing, and strive to be better versions of ourselves.
He talked about how those tough experiences, even the ones that felt devastating at the time, ultimately shaped him into the person he is today. I love that idea of the cracks are where the light gets in.
Me too. And he didn't shy away from discussing his personal growth journey, how he's learned to be more present, savor the good things in his life, and cultivate deeper connections with the people he cares about.
One of the most moving parts of the interview was when he talked about showing up for friends and loved ones.
Yeah.
Especially during tough times.
Yeah.
He said just being present and offering support can be more powerful than trying to fix things or give advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He told this beautiful story about his graduate advisor who passed away.
Oh, wow.
And how her daughters, who were just kids at the time, spoke at her memorial service.
Oh, wow.
And they talked about how the most precious gift their mom gave them was unstructured time.
Yeah.
Just hanging out and being together.
It really makes you think about what's truly important. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can offer is simply our presence, our time, and our attention.
Absolutely. It's about creating those shared experiences.
Yeah.
Those moments of connection that truly matter. And speaking of connection, Huberman brought up the power of friendship.
Right.
And how having even one trusted friend can make a world of difference. Remember his suggestion about texting a friend good morning every day?
Yes. Such a small gesture, but it makes such a big impact. It's like a little ritual that strengthens the bond.
Yeah.
And reminds both people that they're not alone.
And it circles back to what we discussed about dopamine and social connection.
Right.
Those little hits of dopamine from positive interactions can really regulate our mood, boost our well-being, and make us feel like we belong.
It's not just about reaching out when things are tough either.
Yeah.
It's also about celebrating the good times together.
Yes.
Sharing those moments of joy and success that make life so much richer.
Exactly. It's about being there for each other through thick and thin, offering support, encouragement, and a listening ear.
As we wrap up this deep dive, the thing that stays with me is Huberman's message about finding balance between chasing our goals and savoring the present moment.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle, the striving, the constant pursuit of more.
It is. But Huberman reminds us to pause, appreciate what we have, and find joy in the simple things. He even talked about how he's been working on this himself, consciously shifting his focus from always looking ahead to appreciating the good things in his life right now.
It's not about giving up on our dreams. It's about finding that sweet spot where we can strive for growth and fulfillment while also finding contentment and peace in the present.
I think that's the key to a truly meaningful and fulfilling life.
So as we leave you today, we want to leave you with a question to ponder. What small changes can you make to optimize your dopamine system and live a more fulfilling life? Maybe try out an SDR, reach out to a friend, or simply take a moment to appreciate all that you have. The power is in your hands.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.